We fucked up so much, dude. When we walked into SHOT Show in 2008, our product sucked. 2008 Sitka sucked. I was embarrassed at SHOT. There were zipper pulls falling off, threads coming out, and it was a train wreck. But we made it through. We made it through a thousand things. But I think if you have that magic and the right people, you're going to get through those moments.
Awesome, dude. Well, thanks for coming over here. Big effort. I really appreciate it.
Hey,
sorry we had to do it early in the morning like this, but
I was up a couple hours ago, and you never have to twist my arm to come back to Montana.
Yeah. So you're traveling over to Bozeman, so you're gonna have a little bit of maybe some sketchy roads, but
yeah, actually, to be honest with you, I didn't even look at the forecast. I probably should have.
Yeah.
But, the late last night when I looked just briefly, it didn't look too bad, but I'm used to it. I lived here for 7.5 years, so I'll just take it easy. I don't have to actually be there. I got to go tonight, but the funeral I got to go to is tomorrow.
Yeah,
so
okay.
I have all day to get there, so I'll just take my time, grab a coffee.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Where do you live now?
Oregon. Yeah. I left Bozeman in 2019 after I left Sitka.
Okay.
Yeah.
What took you out to Oregon?
I grew up there. So I grew up in rural Oregon, a little logging town. And,
okay.
When we lived in Montana, we had 3 kids, my wife and I. And when I was at Sitka, I was traveling constantly, growing the company. Well, better than anybody, right? Yeah. Growing a company, you're on the road constantly. And my wife was stuck at home with the kids. And but our family's out in Oregon. We both grew up there. So the grandparents would come out, but only so much, right, to help. And hiring babysitters at the time wasn't super affordable. So basically my wife was stuck at home. So long story short, we moved back to Oregon to get close to family, and we wanted our kids to know their grandparents.
Yeah.
Pretty important to us. So that was one of the determining reasons as to why I left my career at Sitka.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
yeah. What that time growing up in Oregon, what did your folks do?
So my dad was in the timber industry. So like I said, it's a little logging town called Dallas, Oregon. And he actually, first he was a shepherd, which is kind of crazy and weird.
Really?
Yeah. He's kind of a stoner hippie,
Yeah.
like in the 70s. And then he actually became addicted to salmon fishing, and he was a dory commercial fisherman with dories. Do you know what a dory is?
No.
Dories are boats. I don't know how many places they do this, but in Oregon there's a place called Pacific City, and in Pacific City they launch the boat right off the sand. So they back the boat trailer into the waves. They dump the boat. They turn it around. They're like with waders on. They turn around, jump in, and hit the motor and go over the waves out there. They fish for the day, and then when they come back in, they get a bunch of speed, and they just fly in and slide up back on the beach.
Really?
It's called dory boat.
Okay.
So he was a dory commercial fisherman for a while, just solo. He would go out, catch salmon every day. And
so I've seen those guys going out doing that, and I've seen some wild videos. In fact, even a dude in Costa Rica. Costa Rica generally doesn't have much for like seas. It's usually pretty calm. But when I was there, they'd had a bunch of bad weather, kind of eroded a beach and whatnot, but it was still pretty rough. And there were some dudes in those little boats like that. And man, for the first like few hundred yards going out there, I mean, they were getting after it.
Oh yeah.
Hitting those waves. And I mean, their boat was damn near straight vertical at times, hitting those things. I was like, dude, those guys are nuts.
Yeah, they are. They have to time it perfectly. They have to wait for the right sets to come in and just hit it full throttle and right over the waves. It's actually really fun.
Yeah.
I've gotten to do it obviously a few times, but I get really seasick. So
same.
Dude, have you found a hack for it? Because I'm still looking for the perfect hack.
So am I. Two things about myself I really don't like, or at least the top two. I struggle to remember names, and I get seasick.
Me too.
And in fact, last time we were in Mexico and tried to go deep sea fishing, my wife videoed me and laughed hilariously as I barfed over the edge of the boat.
It's the worst.
Yeah.
It's the worst feeling ever.
And I want to be a deep sea fisherman. Like I love going out and catching marlin or doing all that. Like it all appeals to me in every way. God. And I always think I'm doing good. Bombing out there and I'm like, I'm good today. Like this is going to be good. And we got out there and then he like kills the engines and they start getting, tackle ready and everything. And then pretty soon, like, you start to get hot, and I'm like, no, like I'm just like fighting it. And then the next thing you know, I'm like, yep, I'm going to get sick.
Dude, the last time it happened to me, I actually made it 3.5 hours. Like, we caught our limits of salmon, and then we went out to check some crab traps, and he pulled up the crab trap, and it must've been the smell or something. And I started to get that kind of flushed feeling.
Yeah.
And just right before that, just like you, I was like, all right, I made it through, because we're going to check the crabs and then go back. I'm like, hell yeah, I made it through my first, and I used, whatever the medication is, the motion sickness. Oh, Dramamine. I had taken that day.
Dude, I ate a handful of those that day, and I still didn't help.
Dude, that crab pot came up, and just out of absolutely nowhere. I was lucky I made it over the side of the boat. But
really?
Oh, yeah. But last year, we were in Molokai with my family, and we went out fishing. I put a patch behind each ear, and I took the pill. Then I can't remember if I took it the night before or whatever, but I actually made it through the trip, and it was choppy. I felt pretty good, but I still felt like I had to like mentally tough through the queasiness. So I had a guy named Cliff Gray on my podcast the other day, and he spearfishes a lot. Dude, I want to be a spear fisherman so badly. Like, it seems so cool. I want to be a surfer. And he's like, dude, I have to fight it every time I go out there. And I'm like, I just don't know if I can do that. If I felt like shit every time I went hunting,
I would find something else to do. Yeah.
By the way? Okay. So, I wouldn't do it.
No, 100%. That's my point. So I had a guy just a couple months ago here in Frenchtown. He's like, hey man, we were at my kid's basketball game, and he was like, hey, we're going on this fishing trip. We just had a dude cancel. It was like cheap, like we're already basically it's already paid for. Throw a little money in and like let's go. And I'm like, that all sounds amazing. But like, I'll be the guy on a 5-day fishing trip that day one's barfing and will feel like shit the entire time. I won't really enjoy it. I'm going to spend money. And frankly, the time away, like you only have so much time when we're doing what we're doing to like go do something. So I'm like, okay, I can take a week and go fishing, or I can take a week in another month and go or two and go bear hunting and not be miserable and barfing.
Yeah. But it is appealing because it's like such a frontier out there. And have you ever spearfished?
We did a little bit off the coast of Maui last year, so we didn't have to boat out. We just swam out off the shore, and I thought it was super cool. But I'm not great in water, and I'm also grew up in Montana, right? So like, I'm not great in water. I'm also nervous that everything on the bottom looks like it's going to sting your ass.
Fact check, true.
And I'm also, there is stuff that can eat you in there, but I'm not even that scared of that necessarily. Like that shit'll happen. I guess it happens, but I don't go out in the woods thinking I'm gonna get eaten by a bear all the time either. But like, I can see the appeal. I would love to do it more, but if it involves a boat, probably not gonna. Yeah, you like it?
I like the thought of it. I like underwater hunting. I was on the Big Island this last summer with a buddy of mine who grew up, and he's like totally Hawaiian. And I'm like, dude, bring your spearfishing stuff. The first time I did it was with Kimmy Warner and Mark Healy off of Lanai. And I lasted like 5 minutes. I'm like, I got to get in the boat. I was sick. I got sick. Just being out, because you're on the boat first. So I'm already queasy, and then you get in the water and you're still like getting rocked. And I know the ocean people are like, you pussy,
Yeah.
I don't know. I felt like crap, so I got in the boat. Anyways, last year on the Big Island, I swam right off the beach with my buddy Steve, and I tried to follow. I made it like 100 yards out there, and I was like following him, but he was so fast and like mobile.
Yeah,
and that's a workout that you don't do anywhere else.
Yes,
right. Like, we're not getting that in Oregon and Montana, and I'm in pretty good shape. But I was like,
well, and if you cramp up out there 100 yards from shore, like, your ass is drowning.
Yeah. And then you look back, you're like, shit, that's a long ways back to the shore. I hope I don't freak. And then I don't know.
I'm thinking about tides, and is it going to suck me out?
And you're like, I don't know. It starts getting, anyways, I went out there, and I just see him like just keep going and going and going. And there's a rock outcropping that I can stand up on. And I stood up and I looked out there, and he was like 100 yards past. I could see his snorkel.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, I'm out. And I came back to shore, and I just sat there and waited for him to come back. It's one of those things where I'm a hunter, and underwater hunting seems so appealing to me. Mark Healy told me one time, he's like, you think elk bugling's cool? I'm like, yeah, of course. That's like my number one thing. He's like, wait till you hear the humpback whales. He's like, let me take you in the ocean. I'm like, oh my God, that would be so rad.
Yeah.
But also I can't hold my breath like Mark Healy.
Yeah, no shit. No shit, dude. Talking to like Justin Lee and those guys that are like, they're telling, and I'm just like, and that was the other thing that was really surprising me when we did, we swam out and we probably got into water that was, at the deepest, there was probably some 20 foot water. Mm-hmm. Most of it was like 6 to 10. And, dude drops down there and he's laying on the bottom and he's just sitting there. And then what I was amazed by is like, you drop down there and like my ears are hurting, and he was showing you how to clear your ears. But then like, one, it's a struggle for me to get down, and then you're laying there and I'm there 10 seconds and I'm like, all right, I'm going to need some air. And he lays there for like 2 minutes, and he's scratching the rocks and he's, trying to get the fish to come. And I just feel like it would take, you'd have to live on the beach and do it a lot to build up your tolerance and your, like, even just like you're saying, swimming out that far, I use so much energy.
Oh my God.
I use a lot of energy to just not drown. These people who, my wife does it, like when we were in Costa Rica, she's out there and she's just treading water, having a conversation, and I'm just over there like working to stay alive.
Have you surfed?
No.
Dude.
There again, I think it would be awesome.
Oh, it's one of the most amazing feelings. Like if you actually stand up and ride a wave in, boogie boarding too, dude. But the workout, getting out there and like paddling in and paddling back out, is something you just can't. Us land dwellers can't replicate that workout. And I get tired after one wave. I've tried it multiple times. In my mind, I'm a surfer. I really want to be. And someday,
I'm a pro surfer.
Yeah. Someday, maybe I'll later when I don't know.
I can also win the Daytona 500. Just give me the right car. If I just had a decent pit crew.
But I think about taking people hunting also that are new to it, right? And I think they look at it the same way. Like, how do you sleep out there? Aren't you scared of bear? That type.
Even
of
the physical side of that, with a little bit of altitude. I've taken some people that are frankly in better shape than I am, and kick their ass. Like, for some reason, just like moving through the mountains and whatever, like even not being in like top fit shape, like I can go in the mountains fine. Like the guide last year was like, damn, bro, like I didn't expect. And we were with a couple guys that are, quote unquote in shape. And I mean, they were struggling.
Yeah. And I think some of that has to do with when you're doing something new, like you're tense and you're nervous and you're like, your cortisol's up. I know this because I started jiu-jitsu last year at the age of 42. And the first 6 months I was ruined every time, ruined. But as I've done it more and I'm a little bit more comfortable, I don't come home nearly as tired or sore, and I last a lot longer in the gym.
Yeah.
I think a lot of my problems in the beginning was I was so nervous and tense, and just you're thinking through everything. It's like but if you've been hunting your whole life, like we have, and my wife, when she comes with me, she's like, you just move through the woods like naturally, like jumping, going with logs, whatever. But it's natural to me. I've been doing it since I was 2.5 years old, 3 years old. So I think there's a little bit of that too. So when Mark Healy gets in the ocean, it's just like home, and to me, it's like this scary new place. And I'm stressed out. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. The, Josh Halls told me several times, he's like, you need to come down to, San Diego and go surf with me and Jocko. And I'm just like, no, like that all sounds, I can envision myself, on a wave, with Jocko, like riding it, but like the whole process of actually doing it. No.
Like, well, and if you're doing it in cold water, no thanks. Dude, I've done it one time in Oregon where I live, and the water's like, I don't know, it's like 48 or 50. No, it was absolutely, even with a wet, I know people are like, dude, if you wear a wetsuit, you're going to be okay. It was still cold. Still cold. And
we sound so tough.
I know, we are tough. Yeah, we are.
The water's cold, and I get sick on the boat, and it's really hard to get
Meanwhile, I'll go hunting.
My ears hurt.
In like, negative 20, and like, it's just a different thing.
Yeah, it is for sure. So growing up, your dad got into logging then?
Or he actually got into buying timberland. So but yeah, he had to learn all the, the logging side of it, the the timber industry is one of the biggest industries where I'm from. And so he was actually a buyer for quite a long time until he had a couple deals go sour and he had to totally get out of it. But yeah, I grew up around tons of logging. I was always going to logging jobs with him because he'd buy property and manage the trees. So I grew up going to a lot of logging jobs, learning all about that and around that industry. And he's done that he's been part of that industry for 45 years. He actually ultimately became more on the real estate side, like representing buyers and stuff. That's why we have our company, Made Out West Land Company now, where we timberland all across Oregon. But yeah, man, he's never had a real job. He's never had a website. He never even had a business card. When I moved back to Oregon to start this company with him, he had never done any marketing. He's just built this reputation and business from nothing. And he had that true entrepreneurial spirit that I think that's what kind of, you could argue it screwed me up and kind of made me what I am, because I can't hold down a normal job either. But that's where I got it from, is my dad. And my grandpa moved out to Oregon in the 50s because of the hunting and fishing. He left his entire family out there in the Pennsylvania. And so kind of the outdoor spirit came from him, passed on to my dad, and then my dad passed the entrepreneurial spirit on to me. So
that's one thing I always say, like we live definitely in the easiest times today and we have lots of advantages and stuff, but I'm definitely jealous of those, like your grandpa, like going from Pennsylvania to Oregon in the 50s and seeing Oregon in the 50s or California or Montana, Idaho. That was before the interstate, I think the interstate in Montana came through in like 68 or 9 or something, 70. Seeing all that country. And we were just talking about this the other day with kind of how, messed up Portland and, the coast, just up and down the coast is with politics and the way things have gone. But if you just took people off of it and you said, like, tell me what the most beautiful state, beautiful landscape, even though I'm from Montana, like, give me California. Like
Northern California it's unbelievably gorgeous. We lived in Sonoma for a while. When Sitka was started in Napa, Dixon, California, but we had our first real office was in Napa. Dude, the Bay Area is unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
If there wasn't 2 million too many people there.
Yeah, and all the way down south. I mean, to be able to be from, the coast to the mountain ranges and all the farm ground in between and the ranch land. I mean, I can't imagine back in the early 1900s what that place would have been. I mean, you can see why everybody flooded to it.
Can you imagine being a Native American and seeing the Bay Area 300 years ago? How beautiful that must have been. Oregon is a beautiful state. We get a bad rap, obviously, and some of it's due, right? Portland is a disaster, and our politics are a disaster. But the state itself is really diverse, and it's actually here's the thing. I grew up there, and wherever you grow up, I feel like you're just waiting to leave. Like you're not gonna there's this like natural rebellious part of you that just wants to get the hell out of there. Yeah. And I had that for sure. And I left for 11 years and traveled the world and did all kinds of cool stuff. When I came back, I had such a greater appreciation for it.
Yeah.
One of the things I don't miss about Montana, for instance, is just the winters didn't really bother me, but I do like the more moderate winters in Oregon, even though I hate the rain. But you can go outside and do stuff and whatever. But I like that I can be at the coast in an hour. I can be skiing in 2 hours. I can be in the desert in 3 hours. It's really diverse. And but to your point, it gets there's not so good parts of it too.
Yeah, and Oregon is similar in the way that Montana and even Washington are, where you've got your west side and your timber ground, your mountains, and you've got your east side with your farm and ranch ground and more arid climate, and it's all those states are very diverse. But I mean, having an ocean, backed up against like your west boundary it's awesome. I mean, it's amazing. It's really too bad that it's the two-legged deer that mess it up.
Yeah. When my grandpa came out, the reason he loved Oregon so much was the steelhead fishing and the salmon fishing, which was incredible back then. Now it's a total train wreck for a multitude of reasons. It's an entire podcast. But mostly it was the mule deer hunting.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, dude, the mule deer hunting that they had in like the 60s and 70s in I would classify it as Central Oregon. If you look at the record books, the genetics there were amazing, but it was a heyday. I used to go through when I was a kid and look through all their old photo books.
Yeah.
I mean, they'd go over there for 5 days and shoot 25 giant bucks.
Yeah, they were a little bit of the problem there
Yes,
for a while.
of course.
Right.
Yes. Yes. Admittedly. My dad admits that now. He's like, yeah, we probably shouldn't have done that.
We would have done it too back then.
Right. And that was just what they knew, right? You go over there, you fill all your tags plus a couple.
Right.
Things have changed a lot. People can judge all they want, but that's just the way that it was back then.
Yeah, and it's changed for the better on that regard, so obviously. But
of course.
I assume then they took you hunting when you were a kid?
Yes. Yeah. My dad started taking me as soon as I came out of the womb. I was helping him guide when I was like 7 years old for elk, and like I was following along in the woods, and even he would let me spot something for clients or whatever. And I used to spend all day outside. I grew up on 20 acres, thankfully, and they'd kick me out the door with my longbow or my BB gun or my 22. Even by the time I was like 7, 8 years old, I had 22, and I just go and shoot birds and frogs and rabbits and whatever I could find. And yeah, man, it was always my number one thing. I was not very naturally intelligent or anything. I was a pretty average student. In fact, in high school, I was below average. I graduated with a 1.82.
Yeah.
A lot of that was because I was drinking too much and having too much fun. But
when you left high school, then you went to college?
I did not. No.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I was actually, believe it or not, a golf pro. So I was a state champion golfer in high school.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I thought that would be a good way to make money so I could hunt too. I thought I had this vision in my mind. Maybe I could golf. And
hunt. A life of golf and hunting is about as good a plan as a person can make.
And there are PGA Tour pros that can do that. The problem was I wasn't good enough to play on the PGA Tour. I mean, I probably would have been a decent Division II golfer, but I wasn't good enough to be even Division I. I maybe could have been. There was one main problem. All the biggest tournaments started in August and in September. And every year I would just fall down the tube when elk started bugling.
Really?
And I just did not care about golf anymore.
Yeah.
So I kind of realized over the course of time, I did that for 4 or 5 years, and I just realized it wasn't what I wanted to do. I cared more about hunting, and that was about the time I met Jason Hairston.
So how did that meeting happen?
So we used to do this pig hunt in California every year with a friend of mine, Brian Morris, and he was friends with Jason Hairston. They lived in the same area, and Jason came on this pig hunt in 2005. Yeah, 2005. And I met Jason. We were down there, and he had a box of prototypes of this new company he was starting, Sitka Gear. And he gave out these vests to everybody. I didn't get one because he didn't have my size. But actually, at the time, I had a journal, and I wrote in my journal, I just met this guy, Jason. He's starting this cool company called Sitka Gear. That'd be cool to work for a company like that someday.
Yeah.
And the next year, he came again, and we kind of became friends. And anyways, I was out picking the driving range one day at this golf course that I worked at. And I forgot to mention, I did start college when I was 22. So I finally did go back to college and work on my business degree.
Okay.
Jason Hairston called me. I was picking the driving range, and I was 3 years into college. And he says, hey, we're looking for our first full-time employee. Besides, so it was Jonathan Hart, Jason Hairston, and then PK Hart, which was Jonathan's brother. So there's 3 of them at the time. He goes, but we need to hire somebody. So would you do it? And I said, man, I would love to, but I have like 2 semesters of college left. And I don't want to quit right now. I'm almost done. But man, call me in 6 months. Okay, no problem. I hang up the phone, go in the pro shop, call my girlfriend. I'm like, dude, I just passed up a frickin' dream job.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh my God, you should have asked about doing internship for college credit. I'm like, oh my God, you're right. And my phone blows up. Jason, answer it. Jason says, hey, what if we got you college credit and you did an internship? And I said, done. I'll be there in 2 weeks. And so because it was almost summer. So I went down there. I spent the summer there, just, how it goes, just sweeping floors, answering phones. I mean, it was only 4 of us, right? And
yeah. So what was it? What was the setting there? Was it a garage? Like
no, so they had just moved into right before I got there. So they came from Jason's Garage, which was in Dixon, California. And right when I got there, they had moved into a corporate park, the first office. So it was like this big, I mean, I think there might have been like 4 or 5 private offices, a couple conference rooms or something. And it was just the 4 of us. And I walked in the first day, and they had just got these boxes of fresh new product, and they set me up with this whole, I mean, it was like, I felt like I was living in like this alternate reality.
Yeah.
Somewhere I have a picture of me wearing all this brand new cool stuff. And
what were those 2 guys' roles at that point with Jonathan and Jason? Like, like Brandon and I here, Brandon's more the marketing guy, right? I'm the knife guy.
Yeah.
What were their roles at that time?
At the time, Jason was more of like kind of business development sales, and Jonathan was more on the marketing brand side. Jonathan's a brilliant brand guy. Mm-hmm. Not that Jason wasn't. He was as well. But at the time, that's kind of how it's set up. And then over time, that morphed a little bit. Mm-hmm. But Jonathan was definitely more the brand marketing, and Jason, I would say at that time, Jason was more on the product side too. So he was, but you know how it works. Everybody's doing everything.
Right.
The phone rings, you answer it, and you figure out how to do it type of thing. You know?
It's kind of a divide and conquer. And
yeah.
Brandon, I'm generally more on the relationship side with our stuff and business development, relationship side. Like Brandon's more of the marketing, like, the actual marketing and setting all that stuff up. But like, definitely there's conversations and there's connections that happen where, he's bringing in guys or making a connection with a company or, doing the relationship side too. So like you say, it's kind of, you just divide and conquer.
For years. I mean, people have this kind of delusional, I guess, thought of how companies run sometimes, especially for the first 5 or even 10 years. Mm-hmm. It's freaking all hands on deck. I mean, we didn't really have really like actual defined roles at Sitka for quite a while. I mean, years. It was, I mean, we did, but, and you would do that maybe 70% of the time. But at the end of the day, like if I was doing marketing stuff, because I ended up being the marketing director, I might be doing that, but I also might have to go back and pack a box
100%,
or frickin', pack a trade show booth.
I say here that the quickest way for me to get rid of somebody here is for me to hear them utter the words, "It's not my job."
Right.
Like that will get you run out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, if you're wired, and there are people that are wired that way, they have to know their day. It happens a little bit later on, right? There are roles. I'm sure Sitka now, I haven't been there for several years, but they're big enough now to where they can probably have pretty defined roles that they know what they're going to do every day, maybe. But even the 11 years I was there, maybe like the last 2 or 3 that really started happening. And actually, to be honest, I don't enjoy that. Yeah. That's why I like hunting. Right. It's an adventure. I like my work to be an adventure. Like I love when we were walking around your office this morning, it brought us back so many fond memories of when we were building Sitka. Mm-hmm. And when we were building some of these other companies I've worked on, it's like, that's the fun part, man. And I think sometimes we get frustrated with it and we're like, God, I can't wait till we're big enough to where I don't have to do this anymore. But I feel like when that happens, I know it because it happened, you'll miss it.
Yeah.
And I try to remind our people at PEAX too. It's like, yeah, you can say that, but remember, this is like the good old days. Like these messes we're dealing with, it's chaos.
Right.
This is the time that like really forges you and you miss it.
Yeah.
And then once it's easy, things that are easy don't really give you that much gratification. And, I don't know. Do you feel the same?
Oh yeah, 100%. No, I love it. So there again, like it's interesting. I heard a quote, like you talk about like high school, right? Like I'm that C student kid, like barely good enough grades to just keep my parents off my ass. Right? Because I wanted to make knives, I wanted to hunt, I wanted to go work with my dad in the excavation business, right? All that stuff. Like, wasn't necessarily the smartest kid, but maybe not because I wasn't capable of it, I just wasn't interested, right? But like, they also say that the C students are the people who figured out. Like, you're the person that's the figured out guy. The straight A student is like the engineer and the doctor and whoever that work for the C student who's just working it and figuring it out and taking gambles and I don't know, but I'm going to work hard and figure it out, and that's that C student. But I think those of us that were like that student in high school are later in life also the people who are willing to just like grind it out, figure it out, and enjoy somewhat of that chaos and that to me, Brandon and I have talked several times. It's like a puzzle. It's like the last couple of years, it feels like we're just trying to put all the edge pieces together. Like, what's this thing going to kind of look like? And then start trying to fill it in. And you're attacking different areas, right? Like of that puzzle of whether it's a connection to a certain, company or a supplier or, all these different places and pieces. And you just start trying to build that puzzle together,
That's exciting. It's adventure. Yeah. I mean, when you get out of the truck in the morning to go hunting, statistically, your odds of being successful are next to nothing.
Right.
Like if you add up all the minutes you hunt, you have to enjoy the fact that you're going to figure it out. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in what you said. I think about it all the time because when I start getting frustrated myself for not being the smartest person, like from a book smart perspective, but I value the fact that I will figure it out. I'm a problem solver. And I kind of like actually, because I've worked with people that they're too smart. They're too smart to where they're almost
analytical.
Yeah, they just get paralyzed with analysis. I'm just dumb enough to think I can figure out almost anything. And I kind of like that about myself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, it's like that stuff I showed you up on my board about planning our next move and stuff. And like, you can do a bunch of planning, and then at a certain point, you just have to be like, fuck it, send it.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to just send it. And like, I don't know, like our sticky notes say it looks like it'll work, but like, we're going to figure it out. Where you could also be looking at a computer screen with everything literally engineered to the exact shape, the wires running to it, you could try to just engineer the hell out of it. But we also know that like, that's nice to have that plan, but reality isn't going to work that way. So like, I'd rather spend a little less time up front. Not that you don't want to plan at all, but like, get a basic plan and then like hire good people and trust that like our people will figure it out. We'll adapt. I
mean, you're friends with obviously a bunch of people that came out of the military, and I didn't serve my country, but I also know quite a few people that came out of special forces specifically. And I feel like, obviously I don't know, I wasn't there, but I feel like based on what I've learned that these people are, they go in with these plans that they worked on over and over and over, but they're also, the reason they are who they are is because our country knows that if we send these guys in with a plan that's most likely going to fall apart, they're going to figure it out and they're going to get out of there alive and be successful.
Elite problem solvers.
Yes. Yes. And I feel like in business, you kind of got to approach it that way too. It's like, yeah, we can build a plan. I mean, I spent years building plans and most of them did not. I mean, the core of the plan should be right. Like the fundamentals, like it should send you in the right direction, obviously, and it should set some guardrails. But for the most part, you're still getting out, you're still opening the door to go hunting on this adventure. Right. You have no idea. Every day in business, you're one phone call away from your world changing, right? For good or bad, and that's kind of the excitement about it.
I'm interested in the mindset about like when you went down there, did it feel like you were like, I'm going to go join these guys? It's a total shot in the dark. Like, was it still like, it had to have been with only four or five people involved. It had to have been super like kind of faith, like you're just having faith that maybe this is going to work out. Maybe it won't, it'll be fun, but like, there's something there, but there's definitely no guarantees. Like, and then at what point do you remember a point where you're like, oh, we're onto something like big?
Yes, I do. Actually, I think about it all the time. So when I said yes, it was that kind of fire and spirit. My dad always told me that you can do anything you want in life. Like he just totally, I know it sounds cliche, but he literally told me that 10,000 times when I was a kid. So I literally believe that. So like when I got that phone call, I'm like, fuck it. I told my girlfriend, what do we have to lose? Right. I had a F-150 that I bought from my dad and like not even enough stuff to fill up the back seat. Like I was still living with my parents, dude. I was 25 years old.
Right.
What the hell did I have to lose? Why not?
Yeah.
So that was
the attitude that all 25-year-olds should have. Like you get an opportunity. I tell my kids all the time, who gives a shit? Send it. It doesn't matter.
No. What's the worst thing?
Go fail, whatever, come home, figure out the next thing.
I can always come home. And that's what, my parents told me that you can always come home.
Yeah.
So I told my girlfriend, fuck it, let's do it. And she's like, fuck it, let's do it. And we literally moved into a 200 square foot boathouse that Jonathan's father-in-law had. Anyways, once I got down there and started, you can feel the magic when something's working. Mm-hmm. So like, I don't know, you've probably spent some time in Nashville.
No, I'm actually going on Tuesday, but I haven't been down there yet.
Oh, okay. So when you go to those honky tonks, you'll go to 5 or 6 of them in a night. You'll see at least one act where you're like, holy shit, that they're going to make it.
Yeah.
Right. And you can't, from a, practically, you maybe can't tell the difference between them and the next 5 guys on Broadway. Mm-hmm. But I'm in the music side too. When you see something that's special, sometimes you can't describe it. Yep. And that energy is just magnetic. And that's kind of what I felt when I got down there. I mean, it was pretty easy to tell. We've sold everything. We sell out everything, just like you guys are, right? So the data was there, but it was also this magic. And I remember calling my dad and going, Dad, you need to invest in this company. Mm-hmm. This company is going to crush. I'm telling you. And oftentimes, and I mentioned the music side because I also write songs and stuff. And I was like Chris Stapleton, for example. Chris Stapleton obviously blew up, but a friend of mine who has a venue in Bozeman called Live from the Divide, a couple years before Chris blew up, he had the opportunity to book Chris for $600.
Yeah.
And he couldn't afford it. So he didn't do it. And then 2 years later, you see what happened. But everybody in the industry knew Chris was going to blow up. Mm-hmm. And then he blew up. I feel like I knew that about Sitka, even though no one knew us yet. I knew 100% for sure that the magic was there. I trusted in Jason and Jonathan. They were both of them brilliant in their own ways, which we can talk about, which is a really important part because doing what they did or what you're doing is incredibly scary and lonely and crazy and chaotic, and it takes the right personality and the right attitude. But once I saw all those, and the product that we had was so much better than anything that had ever been done in the industry that it was just no problem, dude. There was no competition. People need to realize that at the time, it was 2007, there was the only clothing in the hunting industry was what we always used to wear, flannel, wool, and it was fine. We made it through. We survived.
Right.
My grandpa survived.
Right.
But if you went to REI and looked at Patagonia or Arc'teryx or Mountain Hardwear, you're like, damn, this is nice shit.
Right.
Right. So you go to, I remember the first ATA and SHOT Show we did, people are like, what is this? Mm-hmm. This is actually comfortable and light. And so just all those things added up. I'm like, there's no doubt. There's no doubt we're going to make it. Now, that does not mean that it was an easy path.
No, I get it.
Many train wrecks ahead, but that feeling was there.
When was that moment then?
That was within a month of being there. Yeah, that was that summer. That was summer of 2007. Yeah, I moved down there I started June 1st, 2007, and I knew immediately.
And it's similar because I knew when it was just Brandon and I, and we were getting going, and maybe by about the time of that next spring when I'd hired Tristan, who's downstairs, but he was still in high school. He was still at Hellgate High School. I was like, it just felt like this is going to happen. Like I was sure of it. Like there was something, like you say, that special feeling. What's interesting is like where we sit here today, just 3 years in, is it feels, I get the feeling of what you're saying because it's like, now we're at a place where it like, okay, this is happening for sure. It's happening, whatever. But it's also like, man, there's no guarantees because even with all the momentum that you have, and I'm sure you remember that feeling, like all the momentum you guys were having back then, there's that feeling of like, God, like at any moment it feels like it could stop or like one big major problem. Cause like financially, you're not in a place to absorb a multi-million-dollar mistake, right? Or just whatever, right? And so it's like, even with where we're at here today, I can make all the arguments for why we're going to be X size down the road. But man, I have to avoid the rabbit hole of, I can also think of like all the reasons why we could just fuck this shit up in about a year.
And you will fuck some stuff up. I mean, we're humans and it's just life. Like we fucked up so much, dude. Our product line, and this is my opinion, some of my ex-Sitka people might disagree with me, but this is my opinion. When we walked into SHOT Show in 2008, so this would be our third round of clothing. We had just hired new designers, new fabrics, all these things. Our product sucked. 2008 Sitka sucked. Mm-hmm. I was embarrassed. There were zipper pulls falling off, threads coming out, and it was a train wreck. But I also knew the momentum we had was going to carry us through this moment.
Right.
So, and then 2 years later, we launched what was called the Dutch oven, which was a heated vest.
Mm-hmm.
We thought, this was like this is like, the Cybertruck. This is, and it got a lot of PR, but guess what? People started getting burned on their back. A couple people anyway. So we had to do a recall.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. Which for a company of our size, and we didn't have financially, we weren't totally figured out. We were growing so fast and, spending money on all these things. Having a recall at that age it can kill you.
Yeah.
And
100%.
I remember how stressful that was on Jason and Jonathan and our CFO at the time. And obviously I'm like in my cave doing marketing and customer service and stuff. So I didn't necessarily have to carry that stress as much,
right?
But still as an employee, you do. But we made it through, I don't know, a thousand things.
Yeah.
It's just part of growing something that's never been done before by anybody that's ever existed is really hard. But I think if you have that magic and the right people and the problem solving abilities that you must have to get to this point, you're going to get through those moments.
It's a different model. It's similar feel and stuff in certain ways, but then there's, we did it different and we were able to, because if you're making your own thing, you can kind of bootstrap it and you can kind of take your demand and just make what you think you can sell and take it a little bit slower in a certain way. And it provides all its own challenges as well. But that model, which most companies are of like, you have to put in, first of all, you have to sit around in a meeting and like on our whiteboard over here, you have to take a stab at like how many pairs of pants and shirts we think we're going to sell in the next year. And you have to argue all that out. And I'm assuming all this and figure all this out. And then you have to put that order in, right? To overseas or wherever you're having your things manufactured, and then sit and wait on that to come. And I can't imagine the stress of like leveraging, like if we are here today looking at next year, we sit around here talking about how much we have to manufacture next year, which in another way it's similar because we have to buy all the steel for that. We have to buy all the raw goods, right? Mm-hmm. And turn it into something where if we were sourcing, we would have to say, well, we think we can do X million dollars worth of stuff and then put an order in. And by the time it comes in next year, most likely it's either going to be too much or too little. Never going to be perfect. Unless you're just lucky.
Yeah.
That stress of like leveraging everything, spending all of your money, putting all your money out there, because that's generally like what we did with growing this is like you're putting almost all your money into like the next phase, and then it's like you got to make it happen, right? And then you take that money, you put it all into your next phase. And so whether you're sourcing stuff or making it, I can't imagine that stress and that calculating that and trying to figure out how you guys were going to do that. And especially back then, the stress that I'm sure, like you say, is probably more on Jonathan and Jason at the time. Mm-hmm. You remember those conversations?
Oh yeah. Well, because I was involved.
Because they're also looking at you like, how much do you think we can sell? Yeah. We do that with Brandon. Like, what do we think we can sell?
Yeah.
What do we think we can make?
Mm-hmm.
How much?
Well, I mean, it was just four of us around the table. So, I mean, we were all involved in almost all the conversations. And I vividly remember all that. I mean, because in the clothing business, if you're sourcing, which most clothing companies are, you're planning, well, you're designing for 2 years out. You're ordering at least 6 months out, sometimes more than that. So like if you might be writing $1 million checks for inventory 6 or 8 months before you can sell any of it. I mean, dealers can pre-order it, but they don't have to pay until most of them are on 30, 60-day terms from the time they receive the product. So you're not getting paid. You're hanging out money for months. And if you're a startup, you're placing a big bet. You're like, we've never sold any of this before, but we think we can.
Yeah.
Like and if it's your money, it's different if, it was not my money. Right. But if you're the one writing that check, and there was homes leveraged. Yeah. They're big deal. People's livelihoods.
Me and Brandon are personally doing that right now on our next building. Like we're leveraging everything you got.
Yeah.
Like you're literally, you're pushing all the chips in.
Yep.
With everything you have.
And I can only imagine, even though you know that Montana Knife Company is crushing it, it doesn't matter. Deep inside, that stresses you out, keeps you up at night.
Oh yeah.
Motivates you. So it's not all bad, but it's like, it's real, man. Like you look at your wife and your kids, you're like, hey, I'm putting all the chips in and dad's going to succeed. But that doesn't mean it's not scary as shit.
Oh.
And anybody who says it's not is full of shit or totally a sociopath.
Right.
It is. If you're a human being and you're doing what you're doing, or, you know, what any entrepreneur is doing that puts the chips in, it is scary as shit.
Yeah. And it's amazing because people are like, oh, you guys have made it. Like, and it's just like, dude, we're still making knives in my yard. Like literally.
Totally.
You know, like, what do you mean we've made it?
Oh man.
It's actually just getting harder and more stressful because the implications, like if we would have failed in that first year, I was cutting a couple hundred blades at a time.
Right.
A few $1,000s worth of material, right? Like that wasn't when it was actually, and it was risky to quit my job, but I was a lineman. I could go get another lineman job. It's funny. The more success you have, the more actual, like, you know, chances you take and the more like pressure it becomes and the more like irrecoverable, right? If like it all just fails and you lever it all to do that building, like then they just come take everything, right? You have to sell everything to pay that. So it's stressful.
In the music industry, the hardest album is the second one. Like people think these musicians, they're all rich and flying around on jets and shit. Not true.
Yeah.
I know a lot of them. And even when they get a record deal, that's starting at zero. Like whatever happened before that doesn't mean shit.
Yep.
They better sell. Otherwise they're getting fired in a year.
That's how we feel about, you know, 2024 coming into it this year. But like, that's how we now feel like we could have the biggest banner year ever. 2025, we haven't done shit.
Nope.
You're literally starting over.
Yep.
It's a new record.
And it's crazy. It's crazy to think about that, especially if you're like taking chances on products, because maybe you've had success with product ABC, but you're like, maybe we could do this product. And you don't know. I mean, I can tell you that at Sitka, we had a lot of hits, but I bet you if I added it up, we had more misses. But you just want to like, not from a revenue perspective. Like you always plan to where you're like, you manage your risk, but from a strictly a product perspective, or maybe it's about half. But I was thinking on the way over here this morning, how many product failures we had there, like that we thought were going to be, usually it was the coolest thing we thought was going to be so rad, and then it would kind of sell okay, and then they discontinue. I mean, you can watch it from the outside and see any company discontinues, that means it didn't sell.
Right.
Really.
Right.
But I also remember how many products we designed and put a bunch of money into prototyping that we never launched. And it was a lot. It was a lot. Now think about that. If you're the person that's putting money into that, you spend, I don't know, like on the apparel side, you might spend $50,000, $100,000 designing and prototyping something, and then it's not good enough, and then you just cancel it.
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And as you get bigger, Montana Knife or whoever, those bets get bigger and bigger and bigger, and that's why it becomes so stressful, because if you're making 200 blades, you can screw up and get away with it.
Yeah.
But if you're betting on like a $2 million, however many $1 million launch, and you screw it up and no one wants it,
right?
It sucks a little bit.
Yeah. What drove the move to Bozeman? When did that happen?
So in 2010, Gore acquired Sitka, and we just decided that having the company in Napa just didn't make a lot of sense. There's a lot of hunters in Northern California, but it just made more sense from a brand perspective to be in. We analyzed many cities, but Bozeman's where we landed. So there was like this just authenticity play. Like, hey, we need to be somewhere where there's just more of our people. You know. Just also at the time, I mean, I know it sounds crazy to say now, but the cost of doing business there was far cheaper.
Yeah, it now caught California. Yeah,
but so that played into it. I mean, people that grew up in Bozeman are like, when we moved there in 2012, they're like, God, you guys, this place has changed so much, you know. But I lived there from 12 to 19 and a half, and it's like, now I go back, I'm like, dude, even from 2012 or 2019, it's just crazy.
I went to college there in 2000, 99, 2000. And yeah, I can't even hardly find, I mean, I know the main corridors, but I mean, where I was laying out in the field, goose hunting behind what's Costco was just fields. Now it's just homes forever. It's just insane.
It's insane. And the airport. Like,
yeah.
Dude, what? This airport's big now. I remember when I could leave my house an hour before my flight.
Right. Yeah. No, you could get on and fly the plane yourself. So you moved up from California to Bozeman?
Yeah, they moved. I think several of us moved.
Did that transition with Gore then just give you guys the power to really because I look at like even the move that we're trying to make now, right? And it's not that we're going to have to sell to a company or bring money in. We're going to continue kind of doing it the way we're doing it. But there is that possibility where we could just say, hey, we're going to team up with X company, and then they're going to provide like the revenue, the money to really just drive this thing like to a massive scale. Was that kind of the conversation then?
It definitely wasn't not the conversation. Gore is a very powerful company from an innovation perspective. I mean, Gore-Tex, all
materials,
kinds of stuff. They have access to factories and technologies that are very difficult to get access to. And the team and the ethos at the time seemed to fit pretty well with ours. Mm-hmm. We were being very successful, so they in many ways allowed us to continue to do that.
Sure.
So it just made sense for a lot of reasons. I chose to stay with them because at the time, I loved, like, Sitka was my entire identity.
Yeah.
Right? It was like, oh, I'm in this, let's go. Like, and the thought of trying to find another Sitka just wasn't in my mind at the time. So I stayed with them and it was great. I worked for them for obviously whatever that was. But Jason wanted to do something different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when he kind of branched off and KUIU was born.
Right. Yeah. That had to have been a really challenging time. I imagine. I mean, one of the two core guys leaving.
Yeah, it was tumultuous.
Mm-hmm.
And he was one of my best friends at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was very difficult relationship to manage because, I mean, stuff like this happens all the time. What do they say? 90%, 95% of partnerships fail. I can't remember what the stat is. Jamie, look it up. But it's a bad, and it failed. The partnership didn't work out. He wanted to go do his own. Jason was very entrepreneurial. Jason was not the personality that could work for a company like Gore.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not the way his brain was wired.
Sure.
He didn't want to work for anybody. When I first moved down there, he told me that. He's like, fuck working for anybody. I'm doing my own thing. He was a bulldog. So it just made more sense for him to go do that. And at the time, because I was still learning, I still wasn't totally comfortable going out on my own. There was a lot more for me to learn.
Right.
Right. So it made more sense for me to go that way than that.
Well, and it made a lot of sense too. If you're, even if your decision, even if your opportunity was like, hey, come with me and we're going to start this thing called KUIU, even if that was or you have, hey, we've got this thing that seems to be on a rocket ship and now we have Gore behind us.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, that definitely is that's a horse that I would definitely myself want to continue riding that horse,
Yeah, it made a lot of sense. I mean, from my wife and I's perspective, it's like, look, there were months when we didn't know if we were going to get a paycheck before pre the acquisition, and we're like, man, guaranteed paycheck, a reservoir of investment, all kinds of opportunities to learn from, because Gore is a pretty famous company for their culture and all these things. I mean, obviously, I don't agree with everything they do, but obviously, a successful company, there's something I can learn from.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I did. I don't regret it. Jason tried to hire me a couple times in passing, and I maintained my relationship with Jason as much as I could. We had some falling outs and stuff, but and we competed.
Well, and he went on to make grow an awesome brand.
Oh my gosh!
Well, and it was probably good for the industry to have that competition.
It kicked us in the pants. Right. That's for sure. Right. I mean, I was at that time when Jason really got going, I was running our big game division from a marketing perspective, because at that time we'd now been in waterfowl and whitetail and all that stuff. And the competition kept me up at night. That's for sure. I mean, it was fierce. It was fierce. I'm glad I'm not doing that anymore with anybody because it was not a healthy level of competition. There was some pretty gross stuff too.
Right.
But it definitely kept us on our toes. And Jason was great at that. Jason moved fast and, left bodies along the way. He just saw his vision and ran towards it. And that's one of the things I appreciated and I learned from him. He was so confident in himself.
Right.
And I remember the first flight to ATA I did with him. He was telling me he's like, why can't we do tents? Why can't we do sleeping bags? Why can't we do all this shit? No one's going to tell me what I can do. I'm just going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wow, this guy is like confident. Like, this is pretty cool. Like, we can do all that stuff. We have permission. He's like, fuck yeah, we can do it.
Yeah.
And Jonathan was the same way. I mean, I learned so much from both of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to work because it was such a small company. I got to grow up and work in every function of the company and work myself to where I was, one of the faces of the company.
Sure.
And it was one of the greatest blessings of my life, definitely the greatest blessing in my professional career, because like you said, I was a C student.
Right.
And I needed that. I needed somewhere to like cultivate my passion of hunting, but also my entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah.
And then when I left that, I was able to start my own companies and do my own things. And I know how to do it now. Not that it's guaranteed anywhere.
Right.
You know how that is, but you have the tools to succeed. Mm-hmm. It's still on you to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you got to be still today, just looking at that brand, super proud of knowing that, you were a huge part of getting that brand, especially on the marketing side. Like I always say, and that's where I give Brandon, a ton of credit. And I give myself credit for knowing that I needed help like from day one. Right. Cause like I was a custom maker for years, and like you have to market yourself somehow as a custom knife maker or whatever. Any business needs to market themselves somehow. But I knew when I started this that, to grow what I had envisioned, which is this, that I needed expertise. Like, I think that's where like starting a business later in life, you're more willing to admit what you don't know versus like, I'll figure it out. I know I can figure that out. Well, no, that marketing side is an entire profession in its own right. Like, how are you supposed to be a really good knife maker and figure out manufacturing, but also become an expert in marketing, right? And that's where like knowing that I needed that and then finding that in Brandon. And that was definitely a lot of luck and through a couple connections, or one connection really with Sornex in finding Brandon, but then also being willing to relinquish that control and say like, market the shit out of it, man.
He's doing, I told him, you guys are doing it's such an inspiration. In my opinion, the best brand to come out in the last few years in terms of just everything. But the thing about marketing is great. And it's like the difference between a marketer and a great product person is like a plumber and electrician. It's totally different. But you first have to have product.
Yeah.
You have to have a product that is quality and remarkable that people want to talk about and spread the word about. If you don't have that, you can hire the greatest marketer in the world. It ain't going to work.
And that's actually, and I lost track of where I was going, but that's what I was getting at. Like, I knew back then you could have the greatest product. It works both ways. You can have the greatest product and suck at selling it, and no one ever knows about it, and you do a really crappy job, and it's like, it might be the greatest thing ever. You can't market it. And to your point, you can have the greatest marketing ever. And, we say we have more people that have 2 or more knives of ours than one, which means they got one. And like Brandon said, I'll sell the first knife, but the knife and the quality and everything else has to sell the rest of them, right? Like once they get that first pair of Sitka pants, do they want the rain gear? Do they want the base layer? Do they want the mid layer, right? Like that first pair of pants is going to sell the rest of it.
Yes.
And so your job as marketing is to get that first sale, but then that product's going to need to sell more of it,
I've always said I don't want to work for a company where I have to sell anything. Like the product should sell. Will Primos told me one time that he would determine whether a product was marketable or not. He'd go stand at the rack at Cabela's or Bass Pro and listen to what if people had to ask questions about something, he would start to doubt the product.
Sure.
Like that doesn't always work, but the product should spread like wildfire. And then marketing is gasoline. Like, it's just, marketing is really just, it's storytelling. It's like he probably took what was already in your head and polished a story out of it and just provided it to the world. It's not selling.
Well, and that's what he said early on when I was hiring him before we were partners. You know, once he like heard my whole story, he was like, dude, like I've been selling pants and shirts and whatever that don't even have a story. Like we had to create a story. He's like, you have a story. Like all I have to do is just tell it.
Yeah.
You know, so
it's gold.
Yeah. So it really provided a place to do that storytelling. And then, you add some branding, some marketing on and good product. It works out.
And people can sniff out when there's not a story, it's manufactured.
Right.
Like, they're like, but they look at your story just as I did. And you're like, wow, that's cool. That's cool. That's a real story. And then the product's good.
Yeah.
And then the brand's really cool. You want to wear it. I mean, I was wearing I wear your sweatshirt 3 times a week.
That's awesome.
And I don't, you know, it's like, it's just, it doesn't happen all the time, but I felt like we had that at Sitka too. It's like the product's great, spreads like wildfire.
Dude, you had people wearing high-end camo to football games.
Yep.
Like, and that, I always said that about Sitka, and that's where Sitka was an inspiration, was on the marketing side. Yeah, product can be great. It was a fashion statement. If you saw that Sitka logo at a football game, like that dude wants you to know he's wearing that piece of gear. And we all know that piece of gear is expensive. It's really high quality. Like you tend to make some assumptions about that guy, like, oh, he likes good gear. You know, he has a higher expectation for what he puts on.
Yes.
And also it's same way with like people wearing, you know, with women wearing certain brand things and whatnot. Also, they want you to know that they're carrying a Gucci handbag.
Of course.
Right. So that was what was funny. Is like they didn't need high performance camo gear to go to the football game on Friday night and stand out there when it was 60 degrees. They wanted to wear that. And that Sitka gear became like, it was, you know, and that's on your side, that branding and that marketing side was, because then it was, I remember this early with like Black Rifle. Be walking around, you'd see someone else with a Black Rifle hat on, and it was early enough. It was like, oh, that dude's like me. Like,
yes.
Like I can make a judgment about that guy just by the hat.
Pretty easily. Yeah.
And Brandon and I talked about that from day one, because I really watched a lot of what Black Rifle did. If you see someone with an MKC hat on, I want it to mean something. You can know, like that guy, there's some things you can kind of assume about that person. And we could probably be at a party and go have a chat in the corner and get along great and find that we have a lot of commonalities, right? And with Sitka gear, I felt it was kind of similar too. It was like, oh, that guy's a serious hunter. Like he's not riding around the truck and shooting a deer out the window one day. You're like, that dude probably hikes in somewhere. And sets up a tent. You know, like he's hardcore. So it was cool the way you guys did that.
Well, it was thousands and thousands of hours of, you know, a lot of the mastermind behind the brand originated in Jonathan Hart's brain. Jonathan Hart he's not well known in the hunting industry. He doesn't hunt a lot. But he is such a brilliant marketer. And I remember he gave me a whole stack because what happened was I led customer service, then I led customer service. And then I went I launched our guide program there. I spent like a year and a half on that. And then I was asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Where are you most interested? I said, absolutely marketing. I'm creative. I like marketing. And Jonathan's like, all right, come work with me. So I shadowed under him. And then there came a day where he needed to go to the product side. And he goes, I need you to be the marketing director. And I was like, so fucking nervous. Yeah. I'm like, dude, you're giving me your baby?
Yeah.
And
100%. That's a big deal.
Oh yeah. I couldn't sleep that night. And I remember going back to him and saying, like, I'll do it. Like, obviously, like, this is a great opportunity for me, but I need to know that you trust me and that I need your mentorship. Like, I need you to, like, I'm not just like going off into the world here.
Right.
You know, so, but over time I got good at it too. Like when you mentor around someone that's really amazing at something and that's all you do day and night, 24/7. Like that's basically what I did. You get really good at it too.
Right.
I mean, it's like the 10,000 hour rule. And then you attract more people like that because, like you told me this morning when we were walking around, I mean, you and I are both honest. I really do try to surround myself with people that are way better at things than I am.
Yep.
You know, and and I'm humble enough and honest with myself enough to know what I should and should not be doing. And when I was at Sitka, we had great agencies, we had great partners, great employees, and there was things I was really good at that I was kind of nitpicky about, but then there was things I'm like, look, take this amazing thing that's not polished, and here, polish it, just like a knife, right? Goes through these different stations. But again, to the core of it, Sitka had an amazing story. And a great product. And all I got to do is tell it. I don't got to make anything up. By the way, I get to go profile all these amazing hunters and become friends with them and take pictures of the things that God created, like that are amazing in the first place. Like it's not hard to create amazing content in nature.
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
It's been done a lot now, but at the time it had never been seen before.
Yeah. And you're right. It's like, I get, too much credit with our company of like, I'm the knife maker, right? But probably my biggest skill and probably my most important thing and what I am actually good at is finding good people, right? And putting those people where we have Dylan or Jacob or, Henry doing what he's doing at the video side and, Brandon and we, Andrew on the operation side. And it's like finding people and then trusting them and empowering them to like, okay, you're really good at this, do that thing and like stay out of their way, And that's the thing of like knowing what you're not good at. But what I am good at is finding people that are good at that thing.
Someone told me one time that you should do a job where you don't have to be there.
Yeah.
Find a career where you don't have to be there.
Shit.
Hire people to do it.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a way to scale a company, at least without having a toxic culture, unless you do that. If you want to have like a pretty toxic, resentful culture, micromanage the shit out of everybody.
Yeah.
No one wants to work at least they may work for you because they need a paycheck. Right. But it's tough to do that. You have to operate like you do. It's like, dude, I know what I'm good at.
Well, and I want people that believe in this idea. I want people that like see the vision, believe in it. And because then they'll understand. And that's why we share a lot in meetings, way more than we probably even should. But I share a ton because I want our employees to actually understand all the way down to the very bottom, like, or all the way to the top, what's going on behind the scenes? What are the stresses? What are we working on? How are we doing it? All these things, because when they're downstairs putting screws in knives, they understand the mission and why. Of like, okay, I'm doing this because like this is heading somewhere, They feel
like
they also understand. Yeah, they also understand that like that they can start in the warehouse. And someday they might be the marketing director, or they could, this is a company with the growth potential to level up through it. You're not going to necessarily put screws and knives forever.
Scared the shit out of me. But one time I used to commute with Jason. I'd ride in his Jeep and we just got Starbucks and he said, what would you think about being CEO someday of Sitka? And dude, I didn't even know how to be like, I didn't even own a house yet. It's like, I'm like, dude, I can't even fathom that. And I knew that it wasn't true. I mean, I knew that it wasn't going to be true probably, but just the thought of that made me even have more skin in the game. Like this guy believes in me. This guy believes in me. And I feel like when you don't want to lie to people, obviously, but when people feel like they can move up, which is how you should, the most successful hires that I've ever seen or had either came up within the company, started from scrubbing toilets and did whatever, or they just naturally happened.
Right.
You meet somebody, you're like, oh my gosh, this is a cool person. They have the skill that I'm looking for. The worst hires that were ever made, in my opinion, are the ones where you're like scouring resumes on the internet.
Yeah.
And you're like, reading one fucking sheet of paper about somebody that could have totally lied on it.
Right. 100%.
And spending a half hour with them. Oh, yeah. I'd like to get married to them at my company. Yeah. Even though I might have to fire them.
I agree. 1,000%.
I hate that.
Yeah.
I really try to steer clear of it. It's a necessity sometimes. It's really hard to do to find enough people to keep going. But the worst hires I've ever made were like that.
So what made you leave Sitka and where'd you go after that?
I was done there, man. I had run my course. Like I enjoy the first few stages of companies. I don't enjoy once they're too polished. And it's just, I'm not a corporate guy. I don't care about corporate ladders. I don't care about title. I don't want to be like that. The real first chip to fall was I asked, because I was trying to figure out, do I want to be here for the rest of my life? And I asked one of my coworkers who had been with Gore for a long time, and he said, I said, hey, how do I know what I want to do? Like, what should I aspire to be? You know? And he goes, I don't know, look around the company and try to find the people that you want to be like. So I spent a while looking around, and I'm like, I don't really want to be like any of those people. No offense to them.
Right.
But that's just not how I am.
Right.
It doesn't fit my personality. I can't just come to a desk every day and punch a clock and be a number on a spreadsheet, for lack of better terms. So that was the first chip. And then just realizing, and again, being honest with myself, that like, there comes a time in every company, and there'll come a time in this company where you hand the baton off and it's okay. Right. It's okay. There's everything changes. Hunting spots change, jobs change, relationships change. Your career is no different. Like, I'd done 11 years there, and I just felt like I was done. I poured my energy into it when I was, and then the family thing that I already mentioned earlier, that was the biggest thing. We needed to move back and have our kids close. But I remember when I was leaving, the CEO was like, why are you leaving? And I'm like, because you're going to hire somebody better than me. And he's like, why would you ever say that? I'm like, because it's the truth. What do you think? I'm stupid enough to think that I'm the smartest marketing guy for the next phase of what this company needs? This is going to get way bigger than anything I've dealt with. I'm a startup guy. I'm like, I got you, or me and, you know, a small group of people got you here. Right. And I'm proud of that. And I don't owe you anything, and you don't owe me anything. But go find somebody better. Right. You know, he'd never heard that before, I don't think. Yeah. And people still look at me sideways like, why would you ever say that about yourself? Come on, dude. Like, we're all replaceable.
Well, and the way that you market and grow a company, you know, from 0 to 100 million is a hell of a lot different from 100 million to $1 billion. Yes. Like, it just becomes an entirely different model. And
yeah, and I'm a scrappy marketer. I like the guerrilla stuff. I don't really enjoy when stuff gets too polished and too planned. Yeah. It's a different person. So I always describe it as like, there's builders and there's polishers. Like, the people that like really scale a company are the ones that come in and the plane's flying, right? They turn the dials to get, like, they just find these efficiencies and they polish everything and really, and that's when the company goes.
Small percentages.
Yes. Yeah. And that's when the company goes from whatever, you know, if you're 100 million, you go to 200 million, 300 million. I don't really enjoy that, mostly because I'm not really a detail person. I like the big macro changes and like just scrapping. Oh, cool. Let's do this. I mean, dude, we made decisions around pizzas and beers for years. Yeah. Like, I was just texting with somebody I used to work at Sitka with, and he's like, do you remember when we built that company and there was 5 of us or 10 of us, you know? I'm like, yeah, that was fun.
Yeah. And that's how I feel like that's how Brandon is, as far as like, you know, that scrappy marketing, not the kind of marketing where it's like, you're going to give an agency a budget of $2 million and then just say, you know, whatever, you know, like, let us know how it goes. Right. It's, we are big on the relationship side, and, you know, trying to dig in and do different things. And like you say, and also pick up big swaths of people. And, you know, it's funny, as well as everybody thinks that we've done, go to a hunting show in the South and ask if they've ever heard of us. Probably most people haven't. No. Which I love. We love that. Like, when we're at shows, like, hey, have you ever heard of us? No? Good. Because that means we still have a ton of work to do. We can still pick up swaths of people. Yeah. We're not, like, I look at Sitka now, you could say Sitka, Yeti, any name, big name brand, right? Go find somebody that's never heard of Yeti. Right. Or go find someone in the hunt industry that's never heard of Sitka. So that means to me, as just a guy that doesn't know much about marketing, like, God, how do you move the needle? Right? Like, it's easy for us to move the needle. It's easy for us to, you know, go on one podcast and expose ourselves to 1,000 new people that have never heard of us. Right. So we find this time like super, super exciting. And that's part of why, like, we're doing every TAC event this year. I don't know if we're going to make any money on it or not, probably lose some money potentially. But the point is we can go to 12 or 13 new venues and meet people for 3 days apiece that most probably have never heard of us, you know, out in Vermont, right? Like, you know, and down in Georgia and wherever. Because we've largely been doing events more in the west part of the country just because that's where we live, right? It's easy to take the trailer and go to Salt Lake and come back, or Bozeman and come back. So, you know, we're a national brand. Most of our business obviously is out of the state of Montana, but like we haven't gone and put ourselves in front of those people. So like this is the fun part of like, what can we do next to pick up 1,000 new eyeballs, 1,000 new eyeballs, right?
Dude, what you guys have done is so incredible. Like, congratulations.
I appreciate it.
I've been watching obviously from afar, and I told Brandon, right? I told him not this year, but last year at Sheep Show, like how stoked I am for it. I love seeing brands come up. Black Rifle Coffee. I remember the early days of Yeti. I remember like, obviously I've been blessed to know a lot of these companies that flirt. It's just so fun to see because I know how much struggle goes into it and how much stress it is. And, but it's a beautiful thing when it comes together. And you guys have done an outstanding job. And I think the story is so needed too right now. Like your American made and all that stuff. Right. It's really remarkable and inspiring. So I wanted to tell you on air about that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So when you went back to Oregon, what did you do? And you're such an interesting guy because you're into playing music and you have the podcast and then you're in other businesses and I guess in real estate and like, I find it interesting because you're in lots of things.
So when I left Sitka, I decided I never wanted to do one thing again. When I left Sitka, I had a huge crash mentally. I was suicidal. And part of the reason for that is because it was an identity crisis for me. I built my entire life around it.
Yeah.
And I felt I could have been a better dad and a better husband, but like, that's what it took to build it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Like it was like, we were all bleeding orange for 10 years. Right. But when you leave something like that, you're like, who is David Brinker, not the marketing director at Sitka Gear?
Right.
You know, who are my real friends? What do I do?
And I've talked about that a little bit, like with Sloan. When Sloan was the community marketing guy at Yeti, like all of a sudden you leave Yeti, and like you get a lot less phone calls.
Oh yeah, people don't need anything from me anymore. Nope. Yeah. And I controlled the wallet for a long time at Sitka.
Right.
You know, so when I left, I decided that wasn't fun because it took me about a year to get through that stuff. And I'm like, that wasn't a fun mental crisis.
How'd you get through it?
Some therapy, I had to quit drinking. I had to, spend a lot of time around my family. Dude, it was hard. It probably took more like a couple years to get through it. It was really bad. I never want to experience that again. But it took a lot of work. I've done like full podcasts on what I did. I don't know what the solution is because actually people from the industry have like multiple people over the course of the last few years call me with the same problem. I just left whatever. That was my entire being. I have no fucking idea what I'm going to do with my life now.
Right.
I don't know who my friends are. It's a real problem because us Americans get pretty deep in our profession, which is good, but also it can verge on unhealthy.
Right.
Like,
yeah, I'm probably there.
Yeah. But you have to be. You do. Yeah. There's not really a way around it in your position.
Right. Yeah, it is mine. I mean,
but dude, you're conscious of it. You told me this morning the reason I got to do this podcast at 7 is because I got to go to a basketball game for my kids.
Right.
Keep that.
Right.
Like keep that because there was many moments of my kids' childhood that I missed because I had to jump on a plane and do this or that. And I'm not blaming on anybody besides myself. Like I always felt like because I wasn't the smartest person in the room, I had to work harder than the next person over.
Yeah, I get that.
So I kind of overdid it, and it was just a huge crash. So, anyways, to answer your question,
I think that's that C student mentality.
Yeah, it's like I need to do more. Right. And I used to get my like leaders would be like, "Dude, you're overdoing it. Okay, settle down." And I'd be like, "I got to overcompensate because I know I'm not smarter than you." You know. But when I left, I'm like, "Okay, fuck," but I knew my dad had a successful business in Oregon, and I always wanted to work with him. I always thought it'd be cool to work with your dad. And I'm like, I know how to create a brand. My little brother and I spent a few months scheming on this and talking about it. I'm like, I know how to create a brand. Dad does something cool. He's never marketed anything. I love being outside. I love timberland. I love ranches. I love hunting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start a land company. Mm-hmm. And so actually when I moved back, so I sold my house in Bozeman, our house in Bozeman. We moved into a tiny rental. I got my real estate license after a few months, and I went to work for Windermere.
Okay.
Which is just an average real estate company.
Mm-hmm.
And this is right in the pits of, oh my God, what the hell did I just do?
Right.
And I left one of the world leading companies, and now I'm at Windermere.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I knew my 5 and 10 year plan of financial freedom, building a legacy, owning my own shit, not working for anybody, not doing one thing. So anyways, I started my real estate company, Made Out West Land Company. I built a brand around what my dad already did. I learned the trade. I spent every day riding in the truck with him. We were outside. We were selling ranches and timberland, and I actually love it, dude. It's like my baby. Plus, it's my dad's legacy. Like it means so much to me. Mm-hmm. And then I started to miss the hunting industry. So I'm like, well, I better consult a little bit. I know how to do this. Mm-hmm. So I started consulting startups. And then I met Bryce at PEAX when he was just selling trekking poles out of his garage. And I became a partner in that. I really believed in the vision and stuff, and started building that and growing that. And then I've been writing songs since I was like 25. I minored in music. Mm-hmm. So it's always been just something I did. I never wanted to do it for a living because I saw how I saw that side, and I just didn't mean it made sense to me. So I guess to answer your question, a lot of things.
Yeah.
But that's the way I wanted to design it. Now, not to say that doesn't create major problems.
Right.
Like I constantly have to juggle time.
Right.
But I've diversified my professional life almost like one should diversify their finances, right? Like I know that if one thing sinks, like something bad happens, I have other stuff to fall back on.
Right.
And it also keeps it exciting. Every day when I wake up, it's like, okay, I got to do a podcast this morning. Then I'm going to go work on Made Out West Land Company. And then I'm going to spend 3 hours on PEAX. And then I'm going to do this and that and the other thing. And maybe I'm going to start something different today. I never know.
Right.
But it excites me. And we'll see how it goes. I don't know. I'm probably going to have to make some decisions.
Tell me about PEAX.
So it's like equipment. So there's tons of apparel. Mm-hmm. There's some equipment here and there, but one of the holes we saw in the industry was who's focused on the equipment side, who's focused on actually making the backcountry experience more comfortable outside of apparel and backpacks.
Yep.
There's companies that sell tents and sleeping bags and all these things, but there's no one that really focuses dead center on that.
Right.
So we really have no interest right now in apparel or anything like that. We're focused solely on the campsite and keeping people back there longer. The problem, as you know, when you get in the backcountry, it's miserable.
Yeah.
I mean, we love it.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it's not.
Well, it's why a lot of people don't stay back as long as they intend to when they go.
Yeah. And they come home and they want a cheeseburger and a beer. Mm-hmm. But if you stay out longer, it ups your chances of success. Mm-hmm. And we believe that there's been this huge emphasis on cutting ounces and all these things without enough of an emphasis on, hey, can we balance weight, comfort, and durability and kind of meet in the middle to where you actually do have a few luxuries back there?
Well, comfort is a bigger thing than I think a lot of hard-ass dudes want to admit. Like, and the comfort piece, and I've heard, even like Aaron Snyder talk about this, like the comfort thing, especially the older you get, the comfort thing, when you're 42 and, I've had a back surgery, you sleep on the ground or you sleep wrong or whatever, like that can end the hunt, right? So like I would rather carry a little more weight and be sure, whether it's a sleeping pad or a dry tent or whatever, the comfort thing is actually, I think, not talked about enough.
No, it's absolutely not talked about enough. You'll have guys that cut their toothbrush in half, but then they'll wear they have all the nicest Sitka gear. Yeah. Like they obviously like comfort. Otherwise they wouldn't be wearing that.
I've said that about knives. It's like you have all this thousands of dollars in Sitka gear and long range rifle and all this stuff. And then you're taking out a $19 replaceable blade Chinese knife. Like, spend a little bit of money on that last piece of gear. And I think the same thing can be said for like a tent or trekking poles or something like that. You spend all this money everywhere else. And then you take, like, that's your shelter, man, Yeah,
it's like pretty important, right? And if you really pay attention, like there's this tough guy thing in the industry, but like when Sitka came out, it was the same thing. Oh, goddamn, Grandpa made it through with a red flannel jacket. Well, of course he did.
Yeah, 100 in Levi's.
100. Yep. I wore my cowboy boots. I'm fine. Trekking poles. I just use a damn stick. You pussies, you know. And it's like, okay, dude, but like, you watch and pay attention to the people that are actually doing these things. Mm-hmm. My good friend Ryan Lampers, I spent time in camp with him, and I'll be like, hey, Ryan, how much do you suffer? And he'd be like, I don't suffer at all. I'm great. I can stay back here 25 days. Mm-hmm. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, he's like, my system is so fucking dialed. Mm-hmm. I'm not uncomfortable. I know people like to pretend like, oh, you just got to tough it out. He's like, I'm not uncomfortable at all.
Right.
I've figured out a way to do it both. It's not so heavy. It's 1,000,000 pounds, but it's also, I have some creatures of comfort.
It's a little like the seasick thing. How much do you want to go fish if you're sick and miserable the whole time? Right. Yeah. You don't, you just find something else to do. So if you want to go be in the backcountry for 10 days, but you're miserable for all 10 of it, how many times you can do that before you don't want to go back there anymore?
And I think that's why the hot tents are kind of blowing up right now. Like we can't even keep teepees in stock. Mm-hmm. The moment you take a hot tent out October on, you'll never go in the woods without a stove again. Mm-hmm. Like it's just so great. Yeah. But yeah, so we're just like, hey, and I've always kind of had this in my brain. Like I've felt that for a long time, but finally I have a company that I can work with and be a partner in, that where we can focus on that. Like for me, one of my creatures of comfort, I have to have a damn good pillow in the backcountry. If I don't have a pillow, like a lot of people, I use my puffy jacket. I can't do that. I sleep like shit.
I quit the last couple of years. I take a little pillow I can blow up. Like I gotta have a pillow.
Yeah, dude. So
there again, the back and the neck issues, it's a thing.
Yeah, dude. You know? It's already hard enough. Like hunting is hard enough from the truck.
Right.
You go back 6 miles, it's hard, dude. Like you got to have some things to keep you there. Like it's a lonely, hard, cold place. Mm-hmm. So, you know, right now we're trekking poles, you know, sleeping bag, tent, headlamp, et cetera. You'll see next week at the expo, we have a 1,400 square foot booth, and half of our third of our booth is stuff we're coming out with in the next 18 months. And you'll see kind of where we're going. But
oh, cool.
It's a really exciting. I'm loving it. It reminds me of the old days of Sitka, and I'm really proud of it. So that's what I did, man. I kind of wanted to build my own things, and you know, not necessarily literally, but some of them are literally mine. But also partner with people but never like be siloed. Just because I don't know that I have the emotional energy to do that again. And my friend group shrunk not as much as I thought it would, but it's actually pretty cool.
Yeah.
My great friends I kept. Some people I just I'm good. Mm-hmm. And but you know who my best friends are now at this point in my life? My 2 best friends from high school.
Really?
I rekindled my relationships with my friendships from high school, and it's great, fantastic. Obviously, I have my industry friends and stuff like that, but the people that I talk to every day, I don't know. As you get older, man, you value real shit,
right?
You know,
right? No, I agree. Well, you've also got the podcast, the Altitude podcast.
I do.
Why do you do that? What made you start that?
Because I felt I had a little bit of a responsibility to document some conversations with all these cool people I was meeting. When you work for a brand like Sitka or you with Montana, I'm sure I'd be shocked if you're not like, dude, I get to meet the coolest people.
Oh, all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, 5 years ago, I was out hunting wearing Sitka gear, listening to podcasts. I mean, I was a lineman and just a hunter, just a regular average dude, like seeing photos, you know, that's, you know, whoever Stephen Drake's taken or whatever videos are on whoever's platforms. And I was just a fan and a dude wearing Sitka gear out hunting. And it is weird because like 3 years later, you find yourself meeting all these people and you have all these cell phone numbers. And for me, the podcast is a way to share, you know, like the marketing due to Sitka, right? Like I was buying Sitka gear at that time. I was wearing your guys' stuff. I wouldn't have thought then 5 years later, I'd be interviewing that guy that built that brand on my podcast. So like, or even get to know him or meet him. So like you could have just come by the shop and I could have met you, but I feel like this is a way to share my conversation with you with my buddies that are still linemen. or
absolutely.
just the average dude that, you know, is out working, you know.
Exactly the same for me. So like, you know, I'm getting to meet people like Zach Brown and Joe Rogan and all these people. And I'm like, oh my God, dude. And then I go back to my normal life and people are like, you met who?
Right.
Like I go to my jujitsu class and some people are like, dude, I saw you were with so-and-so. They're like, oh my God. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I you know, it's kind of weird. You know, I don't know why. I stumbled into this profession. It's all weird, you know, but I think it would be a disservice for me not to, at least for myself and my kids, to document these conversations with all these really interesting people I can learn stuff from. That's really the reason I did it. I don't need, like, I have no desire to be like a famous podcaster. That's not like, the older I get, the less I want to be known, not the more I want to be known.
Right.
But I get a lot of enjoyment around having those conversations. And I do think there's a lot of wisdom that comes from them, from these guests. And I learn along the way too.
And that's what I was to say, where I'm at in my stage of my company, like, is there something I can learn from the dude that helped build, you know, Sitka? 100%. And all these other conversations I have, like, if there's a tiny nugget here or there that I can pick up, or maybe that leads to a connection a year from now where I call you up and I'm like, hey, I know you worked with so-and-so and I have a question for that guy. Right. So like it's networking and it's learning. The learning thing, I mean, you asked like downstairs, like I didn't do any of this stuff. So like it's all learning. Right. And so I still look at these as opportunities to learn a ton. I mean, you nailed it. 100%.
Yeah. Almost everyone I get off of, I'm like, that was so cool. Like the other day I had Will Primos on for the second time. And every time I talk to that guy, I mean, how old are you?
42.
So we're the same. When we were growing up, Primos was like the marketing machine.
Right.
And I know people like to pretend that like it's like old school, whatever. That guy is brilliant.
Yeah.
That company they built is absolutely brilliant. And so I get off those podcasts. I'm like, I can't believe if you would have told my, 17-year-old self that I could sit down and have a conversation with Will Primos and have Will Primos sending me Christmas cards with handwritten notes to my kids.
Right.
I would have told you you're insane.
Right.
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 If you would have told me that I got to go to UFC with Joe Rogan, which I did, and him and Cam, I would have told you you were insane. Or go backstage. All these cool opportunities happen, and you're like, what am I going to do with it? I got to see this, but like I want to share these conversations. And we were talking today. Someday I hope my kids and my grandkids. So I do I try to do one podcast a week, just solo, and it's like a journal. I'm pretty open about everything. Like this week, I just did 12 months alcohol free. I just kind of went over what I learned, the way it felt, blah, blah, blah. I try to do those. One, so I can process things. Two, someday I hope my kids can go listen to them and maybe learn some more about my life that may help them or down the road.
Even like you said, some of your struggles you've had, it's like, it's hard to sit down with, at what age do you sit down with, are they 17? Are they 15? Are they 26? And you go, let me tell you all about all my struggles, right? Yeah. Like it's hard. Like you said, it's hard to have real conversations. But at a certain point also they might not be ready to learn and hear all that stuff till they're 42. Right. And where they might start like digging in, like they've gotten to an age where we are, and then maybe they are more interested in like, I want to go back and listen to some of that stuff and like, what was my dad all about? Or who knows? Like you get hit by a truck tomorrow, right? And you're gone early, and they have a chance later on to be like, I want to go back and learn more about my dad.
Yeah.
I don't remember those years as well. Or, so like, I think it's so cool what we have today with between video and podcasts and stuff to be able to have, I look and like, God, dang, if I could have all that of, my dad or grandpa or great grandpa growing up.
How valuable would that be to you? You know, I've often thought if I was, hopefully it never happens, but let's say I was diagnosed with something bad. I would sit down and record a bunch of podcasts for my kids and be like, hey, wait a few years, but listen to these someday. And this is kind of what I thought about the world. This is the things I believe. This is the things that I think might help you later on,
Yeah.
It's kind of,
it's probably something you should do anyway, in case, be hit by a truck tomorrow.
True. Yeah. I have thought about that.
It's like, it's not a bad idea. I haven't thought of doing that. That's, like just put them in the safe,
Yep. Just, hey, if anything ever happens to me, listen to these. This is what your dad believes. Cause it's hard to get these journals I've been doing, dude. It's like, you can basically cover one topic at a time. Like I talked about alcohol this week. It might've been whatever the week, might just be a hunting pod, whatever. But I feel like, man, if I could do, like you and I talked, we both had our dads on.
Right.
I love my dad. My dad's episode was the number one episode I got the most feedback on. My mom too. But one of the things when I learned when I talked to my dad was there's so much more I have to learn about him. Mm-hmm. Even though he's been my best friend my whole life, mm-hmm. I still don't know all the things. Like, mm-hmm. And so who knows, maybe I'll make it a frequent thing. Maybe it's twice, every quarter or something. I don't know.
Right.
But just in the world, we're all staring at our phones, computers, building businesses, whatever. We're busy. We don't have time to talk to people. And right. That's one of the things I've learned from listening to Rogan's podcast. It's like his genuine appreciation for sitting down and talking and looking somebody in the eye for 3 hours, right? And
that's like when I was down there and hung out. We did a show, and then it was just him and I and Tyler sitting in a booth in his bar in his podcast, down below his comedy club. He's that guy. Like we sat and talked for 2 hours, and he is that guy. Like it was like we're doing a podcast, but he's inquisitive and he's asking questions. That's who he is. Like,
mm-hmm. It's not an act.
No, he's a very cool person.
He's genuinely the most curious person I've ever met.
Mm-hmm. And also his recall in his brain.
Oh,
I mean,
how does he do that?
I don't know. I have
Can
no
you
idea.
do that?
No,
like,
God, no.
I listened to his podcast. He's like, yeah, do you remember this guy from 19, blah, 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 blah. He did this, invented this.
This low-level fighter, and it's like, no, in 2012, the fight was over in Ireland, and he beat so-and-so with a head kick. And it's like, and he's talking about a dude that's like unknown.
I don't know how he does that, dude. I can barely remember what I did yesterday.
Bonkers.
And I don't remember names.
Yeah.
Like all the foreign, like the names he remembers,
mm-hmm.
It's like, dude.
Or a study he read.
Like, have you ever read a study?
No, God, no. No.
I've never read a study.
No. Yeah.
I've read Wikipedia like sentences.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. No, it's incredible. So yeah, he's a cool dude. Well, man, I really appreciate you coming on.
Dude, this is an honor, man. Yeah. I'm so stoked for you guys.
It's an honor for me, and it's very cool to meet the guy that kind of helped push that, because I'm still to this day like I wear Sitka gear, and mm-hmm. it's what I bought just at Sportsman's Warehouse back in the day, and usually walked in there and looked at it all and couldn't afford it and put it back on the rack, back in those days. And then every now and then you get like one piece, mm-hmm. right? And it's like start putting my little Optifade kit together, and that's what it was like for a lot of us too, was like you go in there and you try it on, you look at it throughout the year, and then you get a piece at Christmas, or you work some overtime, and then like, screw it, I'm going to go buy a pair of pants or whatever, And it's cool to meet you, and it's also cool to see. I've listened to quite a few of your episodes. I enjoy your podcast, the conversations you have, So, and just in the network of being around, like we'd never met each other, but mm-hmm. like you're, highly respected. So
I appreciate that, and I've been truly, like I said, I was a lost soul, and I was truly blessed with what happened, and I try not to let it go to waste, mm-hmm. and I truly enjoy coming and seeing things like this. It keeps me excited. Like, it's amazing how fast your dreams can come true, dude.
Yeah,
I actually didn't realize that this only happened 3 years ago.
Yeah,
that's fucking crazy.
Yeah,
that's insane. I thought I had it all mixed up. What an incredible story, and there's people out there listening that have these things in their mind. Mm-hmm. The same thing can happen.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't mean that it will.
Yeah.
And it can.
I say it 100% can happen. I mean, I started this during the COVID year of 2020, and, but I didn't quit my full-time job until the 1st of January, 21.
That's crazy.
So but I tell people, you can't just quit your job and then just go start your dream. Like, you have to start your dream a lot of times in the morning before work, and at night, late nights and weekends. And then it got to the point where it was like, I think I better quit. Like my wife kept telling me, you need to quit your job. And I'm just like, man, I had a good job, like benefits and good wages, and, lineman job's a great job and it's there forever. And mm-hmm. it's like, it felt selfish, right? Like, I'm going to quit a job to start something I want to start, mm-hmm. but like, I can pay my bills and retire and have a great life mm-hmm. with what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Right. So why would you quit that? Because most people around here would love to have that,
Yeah.
I saw my dad struggles with, being self-employed forever. And there's several times when I was as a lineman, he's like, dude, you got it made. Shit goes south, 4:30, you go home, it's not your problem.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a different mentality than owning your own excavation company and your backhoe breaks down on Monday morning and you got to get it fixed. Like, so it is possible for people though, with enough hard work. And
I think you're right though. I think people, if you read the TikToks and the Instagrams enough, like, fuck it, just quit. It's like, the reason I was able to do what I was able to do is like, we'd had enough equity in our house that when we sold it, I could use that cash to start all my other stuff. But that meant I took like 5 steps backwards from a lifestyle perspective.
Right.
But everybody's different. But I think what you said is the right way to do it. Like, it's a hobby / like, learn how to find what your passion is, learn how to make a little bit of money with it or whatever on the side. Maybe it's on eBay, maybe it's whatever. There's so many ways to do it now. And it's not as hard as it used to be. And then pretty soon you'll be like, shit, I'm kind of making enough money. Yeah, we're going to have to make some lifestyle. Maybe we're not going to Hawaii this year.
Right.
But a couple of years from now, the way I looked at it was like, I need to go down in lifestyle to go way up. Like my long-term potential is much better going down this path than it would be going down this path. And you have to have, and I know we're trying to end this, but
no, you're good.
The thing that actually changed my life was sitting in my backyard on our little cocktail table in Bozeman with my wife in like one of my darkest moments and being like, fuck it. We're going to write on one piece of paper what we want 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now. What do we want in our life? Like, I don't know. I've only thought about Sitka.
Right.
I don't know what do we want? And when you do, like, financially, relationship, kid-wise, geographically, where do you want to be? Blah, 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 blah. You go through this. I think they call it a vision board is the term for it. I didn't know what the hell it was, and we wrote it down and you're like, holy shit. Yeah. The path we're on ain't going to get us there.
Right.
And it's not all about money. People make it about money.
Right.
Money comes when you do the right things. I feel like the right amount of money will come, but you have to like have something to aim at. It's like trying to shoot a gun at something with there's no target. Like,
right.
Once we had something to aim at, like I knew, like by age 50, I want this, that, and the other thing. And it's probably going to turn out to be a little bit different, but at least we aimed the weapon in the right direction.
Right.
And I had something to shoot for. And I was able to clearly see that what we were doing was not working.
Right.
That's what actually changed everything. And then, the other stuff that I told you starts to fit together. Right? Does that make sense?
Oh, no, 100%.
So
and there's different stages in life. Like when I quit and did my thing, I had 4 kids and I was 39, right? And a good job. When you, for example, relating back to when you were young and you have this opportunity, like that's where I give people different advice. Well, if you're 25 and you just have a girlfriend, screw it. Like go send it to whatever. It doesn't matter, right?
Who cares?
If you're 40 and you have 4 kids and responsibilities, you're in a different place.
Yes.
So like, it's different at different stages in life. But the other thing with the money thing is it's funny because I could sell all of this right now and probably have plenty of money, right? But I would immediately turn around and be like, what am I going to do? Like I enjoy what I'm doing here. Like the money isn't the thing, right? Not at all. And there's a custom knife maker, Harvey Dean, that's a older knife maker, and he made a choice back in his 30s, 40s, right in there when he quit his steel mill job or steel worker job to be a custom knife maker. He knew when he did that and his path for the rest of his life was not going to involve much money. Making one custom knife at a time. It's a lot like that way for, people who do pursue music for their whole life. Most people aren't going to be Chris Stapleton, right? You're going to sacrifice. You're probably never going to own that big house. You're never going to have that big yard and that boat, and you're not going to go to Hawaii every year and all that stuff, right? But ultimately, that's health-wise and for how they want to live their life, they get to pursue their passion. But they're not going to be able to do the things their neighbor does.
Yep.
But that's okay. Like Harvey said, like I just knew, but it was going to provide him opportunities to, as a full-time knife maker making custom knives on a Wednesday, if he wants to leave the shop and go hunt, he can, right? But that might mean he has to work Saturday. But it allowed him flexibility. And so I guess what I'm saying is people a lot of times are also too worried about the money when maybe that hobby can turn into your business, but that business is only going to make you $70,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
But if that's all you need to be happy, then fine. Like you can step out of that career where you're making 120, but you, like your point, you have to make some adjustments to your lifestyle, you know?
I get to work around a lot of wealthy people in one of my professions. And like, there's a certain amount of money that makes you happier because financial problems are really real. I mean, I was the same. My dad was self-employed. My mom really never worked.
Yeah, if you're making $40,000 a year, it's a struggle.
I remember when my dad lost everything, going from making $1 million a year to zero, and had to buy a $500, like what looked like a rapist van and drive it for literally a year.
Yeah.
And it barely ran and it broke down all the time. I remember those struggles. I don't ever want to go through that.
Right.
Financial problems are real, but money only solves financial problems.
Right.
It doesn't solve all your other problems. So you got to like get your life in order in all areas, but it just depends what you want, man. Like I have friends that money does not mean anything to them. Right. I have friends that just want to hunt 150 days a year.
Yep.
They don't give a shit about money. They don't even want to own a house.
Right.
They don't care. I care about money from the standpoint of by the time I'm 50, I want to be financially free enough to where I can only work. And actually, to be honest with you, I'm already doing this. I only work on the things that I really get some passion out of.
Right.
I'm very lucky already. Maybe I've already reached that goal. Maybe I don't need any more. I don't know. But money is part of my motivation, but it's like one of like 10 things.
Right.
But you have to decide what you want. I have musicians friends that are just plenty happy. They want to just live out of a van and play music and make $200 a night. Whatever, man. Like we only get to live so long.
Right.
Do what you want, but have something to aim at. And if you are one of those people that want to get rich, quote unquote, that's sticky motivation.
Right.
But if let's just say that's one of your top priorities, there's only a couple ways to do that. And one of them is starting a company.
Right.
The other one is to inherit it.
It's true.
So like, that's basically.
Well, and it's going to come with, no matter what, it's going to come with some sacrifices. I mean, maybe not the inheriting part, but whether you're starting a company or you're just a career guy or a brain surgeon or whatever, it's going to come with some sacrifices, right? I mean, the reason people get rich and the reason they get paid that is because it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and
most of them don't ever get to spend it really.
Right.
I know people that are like, damn, I never really got to spend any of my money.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm kind of more like, just solving financial problems. That's like being able to pay your bills feels good, man.
Yeah.
Like I remember when we were there was when we first moved to Bozeman, you know, when Sitka was young, like none of us were getting rich. You know how it is.
Yeah.
Like I remember having to ask my wife about buying a Starbucks coffee. Right? Hey,
for
honey,
sure.
can I buy a $5 coffee today?
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, and same thing when I got divorced and trying to figure out how to save my house, and I bought an old piece of shit truck for my foreman, and then the second time I drove it with my kids up on Lolo Pass, it died, and I had to call for a ride. Like, my house burned down. I lived in a camper in the driveway with my 4 kids, and like, you know, so I mean, I was as broke as could be, but figured it out, you know.
Car problems are another one of those. I grew up with cars that didn't work. So when I finally had the ability to buy new cars, like I have a new truck and I don't care. I'm paying the ugly payments on it because it doesn't fucking break down. Because I grew up with broke down cars.
No shit.
So like I don't want my kids to deal with that. Our cars were always broke down. But no, man, it just depends on what you want. But I like shit comes true. Like, especially these people that like in the day and age now, art is valuable again. Like your art, whatever, maybe it's songwriting or painting or whatever. Like social media is powerful. YouTube's powerful. Show the world what you do, sell it on the side, and then you might get to a point. I know a painter, she crushes it. Just
well, and I say, you know, the tools you didn't have at Sitka back in those days that like we have today is, you know, you can. And I never had this in my custom world, but like you have the most powerful marketing platform in the world available for free. So like with social media, you can use that to build your brand and your company through, you know, Sitka kind of had it, but like not like today.
no,
Like where like we started, we were able to be largely an Instagram company and market for free. Back when I was a custom maker, you had to buy ads in magazines. You had to go buy ads somewhere. If you were Montana Knife Company back then, or, let's say Buck Knives back then, you had to buy ads on a television show. So like for our ability these days to reach people. So if you're a part-time guy in your garage doing something, your ability to reach anyone is incredible. It's such a powerful tool. People shit on social media, and there's the only reason social media is bad, or it's how you use it, and obviously there's bad shit on there, but what do you use it for? So our, we built a company off of it. It's an amazing tool, so.
Oh, it's incredible. I remember the day we started our Instagram account on Sitka. It was a fight. It's like, I remember the day we started a Facebook account. Yeah. It didn't exist. Marketing, that's a whole nother podcast, but that changes constantly. But to your point, like, it's a great time to be a young musician with TikTok. Yep. You can get discovered on TikTok today. One freaking just recording on your iPhone. Well,
the dude that Rogan had on, red hair.
Oh yeah,
dude, that's that guy, right?
Oliver Anthony.
Yeah, the Oliver Anthony. That's that guy. One song becomes mega.
Just turned down a tour with Garth Brooks.
Unbelievable. So I mean, that's the example right there. That you can just be a dude in the holler and be famous overnight.
Absolutely.
Where can people find you?
You follow me on Instagram, Dave Brinker _. My podcast has a YouTube channel. It's the Altitude Show. It's obviously out on all podcast platforms too. We put out at least one episode a week, sometimes two. That's really it.
Well, man, I appreciate you making the effort to come over.
I love it.
Cool hearing your story. Appreciate you being open about it and telling us. So
yeah, I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll have to do it again.
Let's do it.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, bud.
Absolutely.